Yes, there we go. Hi, everybody. It's Joe Cioffi here on this Monday night. Just got off from work, and we've got the season's second hurricane in Hurricane Gert. And top winds are 75 miles an hour. It is moving northward. It's going to turn northeastward, and it may strengthen some more. Conditions are rather favorable. We're going to get into that in just a second. One of the things I would just point out with respect to Gert and how this all evolved, please remember how the models got here, and some of them did not get here. The GFS all through the weekend couldn't even show this system developing. Barely showed a kink in the isobar on the surface. For days and days, it had nothing. Some of the other models had it to some degree, but they all didn't do well, and in particular, the GFS did very poorly. So when we're looking out in the long range, bear in mind that it's not going to get these things sometimes, and that's exactly what happened here. So let's get the weather part of this started, and then we'll come back at the end, and we will have a conversation. So just hang on one second. We now have the second hurricane of the Atlantic season, and Hurricane Gert, which has developed an eye, and the National Hurricane Center, based on its satellite estimates, has upgraded this to a hurricane. Let me see if I can get the latest map up. Maximum sustained winds are 75 miles an hour. The actual map hasn't been updated yet, but this is the forecast track from the Hurricane Center at 5 p.m. So I'm suspecting that the new forecast will be about the same. One of the things that's a little different is that the Hurricane Center has actually raised the strength of this in its forecast to 90 knots in its track to the northeast, noting that the wind shear is actually going to drop off even more as it moves northeastward. It's going to be over warm water, so there may be nothing to stop this from getting up to at least 90 knots before it finally, moves far enough out into the Atlantic and starts to encounter less favorable conditions, and then ultimately goes into the graveyard of Atlantic tropical systems. And one of the impacts of this, actually the only impact with respect to the coastline from North Carolina and Virginia on up into southern New England, will be the increasing surf that we will see from this over the next couple of days. So other than that, that's really all we have to worry about with respect to Gert. And you can see on the satellite loop as it goes forward in time, probably right in there somewhere looks like some semblance of an eye. It's still, there's not that much on the west side at the moment in terms of convection, but it certainly looks like it's trying to wrap around. You can see a kind of hook there with the higher and colder cloud tops, and those tops are actually expanding. So it still is in the development process. Here is the coast of North Carolina. It's moving northward, and then it'll gradually make its turn to the northeast. It's not quite on the same latitude yet as Bermuda, which is right here, but it's going to pass right in between those two land areas. And now you can get the perspective here on the wide Atlantic view, and we can start to look at this large area of disturbed weather. There's probably there actually is two tropical waves in this, a lead wave and then a one behind it, which the Hurricane Center is actually highlighting both in its outlook, giving a 60% chance of this developing in the next 5 days, and the one behind it, a 20% chance. And some of the models actually do develop both systems. But I'm going to make a point here with respect to the models. Remember that what the GFS did days and days ago, and then it did absolutely nothing with this system that became Hurricane Gert. So that is a note for you to remember when you look at these models, both in the short and in the long range, that the global models sometimes have a real difficult time with these tropical systems. And I suspect that the global models are going to have an equally difficult time with the next two waves that are moving westward. This one here is back near 15 west, and this one, the lead wave, it looks like it's axised at about 40 degrees west. And when we look at the water vapor imagery, we've been talking about this for quite a while with respect to all the dry air that is still there to some degree, but at least the tropical waves seem to be in their own developing tropical environment. So we'll see what happens when a circulation tries to form, or if it does, whether some of that dry air gets entrained in all of this. And of course, the other issue is upper lows and strong wind shear. And it looks like the upper lows that are out in the Atlantic, we can see two of them. There's one here, a larger upper low, and then a smaller one to the west, they are not nearly as strong or as dominant like the upper low that we saw a couple of weeks ago. So, and they're far enough north, I think, that they're not going to get in the way and produce strong wind shear. So the environment for both these waves seems to be conducive for development. The lead wave doesn't look like it has all that much at the moment. There's a little more convection with the second wave, but we'll follow this along. Now here's tonight's model track guidance. And you can see there is variation here in terms of the track. You have a cluster that move the next system over the southern Leeward Islands into the northeastern Caribbean. A few of them take it a little further south, and then you've got a stray one that takes it just north of the islands. So I think we can just probably focus on the cluster here at this point, assuming that we have a viable system. The general track is going to be basically to the west for the next several days, and then we will go forward from there. Now, let's look at the GFS first. And this is the late afternoon run of the GFS. Let me just punch it up for you. Patiently load. And so here you have Gert. And you have high pressure out in the Atlantic. You can see this little closed isobar south of the Cabo Verde Islands. Generally there's low pressure across much of the tropical Atlantic. And the last two runs before this lost this lead system. Now it reappears again. And then you have the second one that, takes its time. There's actually a third wave that's behind it that's probably coming out. And that the model picks up on. Now the GFS on this run decided to take that lead wave and take it north-northwest into the Atlantic, okay? And then it takes this second wave, the second system, and it takes that into the northeast Caribbean and develops it, and it moves it along. Again, with what we just went through, I'm only going to take this out 10 days, but with what we just went through with this system in terms of what the models did with it and how it evolved, it really is just futile to look at these things with, that they have any kind of real value at all. And the European, by the way, and I'll roll the European back. Let's go to the beginning of the European model from the day run. So you've got your lead system right there, which it kind of closes off into a certain little circulation approaching the leewards. Here's a second one, and it loses the first one, develops the second, and takes it to just west of Bermuda by 240 hours. So, that is the Europeans' idea. And we'll go to the Canadian. And of course, the Canadian's going to wind up spinning everything. So here's Gert. Here's the second system, which it spins up. Actually spins up a third low one here, another one back on the African coast, takes that lead system out east of Bermuda, and then brings up another one right behind it, and here comes another one that comes off the African coast. So again, a lot of variability here with what the models are doing. I just show them to you because you can see them. I mean, it's no secret that they're out there. But the most important thing I think we can look at in these instances is the general flavor of the upper air, because I think at the end of the day, if there is a tropical system around, let's look at what the upper air is supposed to look like. Now, the GFS over time, and we'll start at 0. All right, So here we have, I just moved it to tomorrow evening. All right, so here's your jet in the across the United States. There's Gert that's going to react to that by turning out. Here's your ridge in the Atlantic. Pretty much west motion being indicated here around the upper high. So it's going to move from east. Weather systems are going to try to move from east to west as long as there's no weakness that we can't see. Now, there is some weakness in the ridge on the GFS that shows up in the middle of the Atlantic and stretching it across. But generally, there's higher pressures across the Atlantic. And going into day 6, you've got another trough here approaching the East Coast on Sunday. And that at least we get an idea that we still have these little short waves dropping into the eastern part of the United States. But overall, there's a ridge across the Atlantic. And I think that is the most important takeaway through all of this. And the European, which changed somewhat, and I'll illustrate the change from the earlier runs. The thing with the European was that during the earlier runs, it basically had a fairly strong but narrow east-west ridge, okay? And that would, favor a westward component of motion for a long, long time. All right. And this run was a little different because it does show, some areas of weakness with the ridge as we go forward. So let me do that. Okay. It still has, the Atlantic ridge. Now this is at 168 hours. And you can see there are weaknesses. Here's the ridge across the Atlantic. And, there are little weaknesses that show up in a few spots. So you have to, that's going to be the key question with this in the long term, whether these weaknesses wind up meaning anything. And again, assuming that we do have systems that develop. So let's see what happens now with the waves that are coming off. I would just say, by the way, looking at this satellite image, if you remember back when the system that became Gert was 99L, it was a very, you had this sort of elongated area of disturbed weather. And this one is not that different. I mean, you just have a lot of disturbed weather in the intertropical convergence zone. And sometimes when these systems are like this, it takes them a little while to get going. And as you saw in the case with Gert, it had to get west of 65 west before there was any meaningful development out of it. So let's keep an open mind on all of this. None of this is written in stone. We'll see what the overnight models do with it. In the meantime, we'll stick around a little bit for a chat. So just hang on one second while I switch everything all around, and we'll go from there. A little bit for a chat. So just hang on one second while I switch everything all around, and we'll go from there. And I've switched everything around so we can go from here. Okay, so again, just to reiterate the takeaway, from all of this, the last number of days, the models are there as representations of what they think the atmosphere is going to look like. Sometimes the atmosphere doesn't cooperate exactly. So we've got these next two systems that are moving off the African coast. I think the tracks generally will be favorable more to the west, at least for a while. We'll have to wait till we get into the short range, and we will see what it does tomorrow. But right now, looks like we are entering a rather active phase of tropical storm activity. And you notice, by the way, that the Pacific has quieted down considerably. There's hardly anything going on the Pacific side. Thomas Giovanello, the eclipse weather looking. If you're asking for the New York, New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, Hudson Valley area, we might have a break on Monday. It looks like we get a little weather system to move on through during the weekend. Might bring down a dry air mass from the Great Lakes so that we have a better chance for clear skies. But even, a lot of times, at least up here, there's a high probability that there's going to be at least some clouds. It's very rare that we have a clear day from beginning to end. So the issue is whether, a couple of clouds decide to develop at the time of the eclipse, which could ruin your viewing. But we'll talk about that more on Tuesday. I didn't want to really get into the eclipse stuff here. I figured I just wanted to focus pretty much on the tropical stuff. Delvin, what time does FiOS 1 News air? It's actually on all day, 24 hours. But you can catch me. I will actually be on day side tomorrow. So I will be on from noon through 4 p.m. Okay. Usually I'm on from 5 p.m. till 1 a.m. But I'm switching shifts on tomorrow, so I will be on the day side. So you can catch me if you're looking at the FiOS 1 News website, fios1news.com, from noon through the 4 o'clock hour, so noon until 5 p.m. And then my colleague Joe Rayo takes over at 5 p.m. And in the morning ahead of me, you have my boss, Brian Fitzgerald, and Jeff Banson, who work on the day side for Long Island, New Jersey, and Hudson Valley. And yeah, there's some showers. Actually, looks like a little ripple wave developed on that old cold front, because we got clouds that came in here during this afternoon, and we have them here tonight. There's been some patchy light rain passing to my south. Looks like another band coming out of Pennsylvania might be a little healthier, so might get into a few rain showers during the early morning hours, and hopefully it'll be out of here by daybreak, because I kind of thought that they would just dry up before they got here, but they seem to be holding together. We'll see. It kind of sort of went against the models. Invest 91L wind. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I mean, I know what Invest 91L is, but I'm not sure what you mean by wind. The strength is crazy on some models. Ridiculous. Are you talking about, down the road in terms of what it develops into? I'm still not understanding, I mean, are you referencing the fact that the systems develop in terms of what it produces for wind? Or are you, okay, so like on the intensity guidance, I didn't look at the intensity guidance for 91L. Let me take a look really fast. Yeah, some of them are ridiculous. It's the intensity guidance from 91L, which is a system that's back, east, south of the Cabo Verde Islands. We have all but 2 models strengthen this to a tropical storm. Actually, most of this have them as a hurricane by 84 hours, and one takes it to a Category 5. So it's ridiculous. You've got one model on one end that can't get it above 25 knots, and that probably signals that it doesn't develop it at all. Maybe it doesn't even develop a closed circulation. And then you have one that's a Category 5, which would be 135 knots or higher. I mean, how are you supposed to try to make any kind of sensible forecast out of that when you've got such a huge range along those lines? Marion Reed, do I think 91L could get as far as Jamaica? Getting systems into the Eastern Caribbean is pretty tough, especially once they get in there. A lot of times conditions are not usually good for development in the Eastern Caribbean, and oftentimes systems do get weakened and get ripped apart, mainly because of strong winds that come off the continent from South America. You know what? My general feel on this is that it probably will go. It will go west, and that we're going to be sitting here in a couple of days wondering whether it will keep going west rather than shift to the north. But I don't want to speculate this early in the game. We may, we still don't even know if we're going to have a system at that point. You'll get clouds and showers tomorrow in Boston, Delvin. On the edge of that front that's to your south, with a little wave going by wouldn't be a surprise. Okay, you know what, folks? It's a long day for me, and I got to now go to Facebook and take care of Facebook. So I'll be restreaming over on that side. In the meantime, check out, there'll be more, latest posts tomorrow. on meteorologistjoecioffi.com and Angry Ben on nycweathernow.com. Also, I will live stream tomorrow probably at around 5 p.m. Eastern time, roughly, maybe 5 to 5:30, sometime in that time frame. And I'll schedule it. I've already scheduled. I will schedule it for 5 p.m., but I might have to push it back to 5:30. So I'm just going to give you a heads up with respect to the stream time for tomorrow. So everybody have a great evening. I got to say, I'm really enjoying this, doing this on a daily basis, and lately it's been on a twice-a-day basis. So this is good practice for if a threat develops, because then it'll get pretty busy, and I'm sure the chat will get pretty busy as well. And I love it when you guys chat, so you want to ask questions and we talk. It's most enjoying, and I really appreciate it. Okay, and by the way, just so you know, because somebody asked me about this, I have to put up that open I do. I put it up, you know, where you got the Joe Stradamus logo, and it says that I'll be up. The broadcast will start shortly. This is because it takes me about 1 minute and 30 seconds or so to set up all the audio, to do, you know, you have to put in entries to make sure the titles are okay, and you know, all the right buttons are pushed. So I try to do that 1.5 minutes before the set stream time, so that when we hit on the hour or on the half hour, that I come up live. So that's the reason why you see that little 1.5 minutes beforehand. That's just to give me a little prep time to do, which I can't do until I start the live. So it's a double-edged sword, and I'm not, you know, good at doing all the switching, that shutting audio, you know, shutting microphones off, one microphone off, turning another audio source on, and so on. So appreciate your patience. And if you watch these later on, and if you miss one of these live streams and you go back to replay it, you can, if you scroll in about 1 minute and a half, you can pass the open part with the eerie music and go right to the beginning of the weather part of the stream. All right, thanks very much. Thank you, Three Pistols, for the thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow, probably around 5 p.m. Eastern time.